Hi guys, welcome to another episode of our full stack mobile development series. In today's episode, we are going to continue on our Laravel project. We are going to build the endpoint for the account so that when the user opens the application for the first time during the onboarding process, they are going to create their first account. In our previous episode, we learned how to write the APIs for the currencies as well as the account types, and we tested it using Postman. So over here, we have all our currencies. We also added pagination and search to both the currencies as well as the account types. All right. So today we are just going to focus on the user adding the account. We are going to set up the model for the account, the migration, as well as the controller for the endpoints. To begin, we head over to our Android to the VS Code. Sorry, today we are doing Laravel, so we head over to our VS Code, and then I open the integrated terminal here. Can go ahead and zoom in. Okay. And then I type PHP artisan make model, and our model here is going to be account. So we need the migration, we need the controller with the resource for now. We need that, and then we go ahead and create it. So we have the three files. So this is our model. Now let's start with the migration. Like we said, we just want to have similar to this, so we can just copy this over. Okay, so we want the ID, the UID to expose, the name of the account. So there are other things that you want to keep track of the account. So we have the name of the account, which is there. Now over here, we need a foreign ID, which is the type of account. So account type ID, and this is going to be constrained on the account types table. All right. So that's the account type ID. The next thing we want to have is the currency, and that's on the currencies table. Oh, sorry, I can just fix the title here. Okay. And then it's active on that. I think another thing we want to have is a string, which is going to be the color code, and that can be nullable for now. Okay, we have the active, the timestamps and all that. All right. And the last thing we want to add is before the color code is we want to have a decimal, because we're going to be dealing with numbers. So decimal, and that's the initial balance. So when you create the account, what's the initial balance? And we are going to have 18. So it's going to be 18 in length, and then you can put the decimal place at 2, but by default the decimal is 2, 8, but we want to have 18 so that we can handle millions and billions and all that. So we have our initial balance, you have the name, we have the account type, the currency. I think for now we have the things that we need, including the color code. We do not have the color code on this UI. That's how I've set it to nullable, so it's not required. Okay, and then we head over to our model here. Now remember, we created a base model in a previous episode, so we are going to switch this to our base model. That means we do not need this, and we do not need a use factory because that's already defined here. But what we are going to do is use soft delete. Okay, and then we need our fillables just as we had from the previous one. To save time, I'm just going to go ahead and copy this. So we have the account name, the account type ID, the currency ID, we have active, we have color code, and then we have the initial balance. All right, so we can go ahead and minimize this. Okay, so we've set up that. Then the next thing we want to do is we want to set up our routes. So the controllers, as you can see, was put in the routes. So we're going to move it here. And then when we do that, we want to also make sure that we do this. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to install an extension that will help you to create classes and all that. So to do that, we head over to the extensions and I look for PHP create class. Okay, so I install this extension by one. And once I'm done, I know I have it. Okay, so now, as we did in our previous episodes, we have our controller, we inject our service class and all that. So I head over to my services here, and then I create a new PHP file. So new PHP file class, and I give the name of my class, which is account service. So now we realize that it sorts out everything. It initializes the file, puts the namespace and everything, and then you can just go ahead and continue coding like before we used to do all this by ourselves. Okay, so I have my class. I head over to my controller here, So protected account service, okay. And then I need my constructor. Okay, so if you look at the previous episodes, we have our constructor there, but here I'm just gonna inject this. Okay, all right, so now we have our constructor. Okay, so this is going to load the person's account. We are going to create and store and all those things, so I don't need these ones. So for now I'm just going to remove this. We are going to create an account and then list the accounts the user has. Okay, so to do this, we head over to our Postman, and then we can duplicate one of this and then just rename this. So get account by ID, and then we want to create account. Okay, so all right, so I've set up these things. I just change this to account. Just rename this account, and then I'm going to change this to account ID. We are going to set it later on, and this is going to be an account with a post, and we are going to also set up the body for this one. All right, so now let's work on our service. So in our service here, we are going to have a function to store to create an account. So create, and then this is going to take our object, which is the request, and then we have the user. Okay, and then this is supposed to return an account. Okay, we've done that. So we have to import the user, sorry. Okay, and then we have to import the account as well. All right, so we know what needs to be available to create an account, and that's this. So we're just going to say account is equal to account, and then create. Now there's one thing that we missed when we were doing the migration, so I'm going to go ahead and do it. So we have the account and everything. Another thing we need is who owns the account, right? So I'm going to create this here, user ID, and then the user. So this is the user that owns this particular account, because a user can have multiple accounts. So I'm just going to push all the foreign keys up there and then start with the name, initial, balance, and the color. Okay, so here I want to do the same thing. I'm just going to move this here. I'm going to create the user ID. Okay, all right, and then I need to also make the user ID available. Move the name down here. Okay, so here we are saying that the user ID, and in our function the user is the first argument, the account type ID, the currency ID, and the name. So I'm just going to go ahead and do these ones. So by default the active is going to be 1, the color code is going to be this. Okay, if the color code exists or not. Okay, and then the initial balance is going to be that, and then the name is going to be this. Okay, and then here I want to return my account. For now I'm just going to, I can return at the top level here, but for now I just want to do this. Okay, so we pass the user and the entire request. Now in the request, what we plan to do is we plan to also get the user to send us the account type and then the currency that's for this particular account. And once we get that from here, we can also extract our currency. So over here I can say that account type is equal to account type, where the UID, and that's because the front end will always be sending us the UIDs instead of the integers. So here we are going to pass this field, and then we say find or fail. Now if it does not exist, it will just throw an error that we couldn't get that. We can customize the error, but for now I just want us to go ahead and make it simple. Okay, so now once we have this, then we say that the currency is this and the account type ID is that. Okay, so now this method takes in a user and then an object request. We get the account type and the currencies from our database using their EUIDs. And we do that because we want to make sure that the EUID is valid and it's in the database. And then we get the ID, which is the primary key, the integer, and we use it as the foreign keys here. Then we set the name, the initial balance, the color code, and then once we are done, we return this. So we can go ahead and return this up here if we do not have any use for the account variable down there. Okay, now in our controller, just as we did for the previous request, we are going to do the same thing. So now to create an account is going to return a response. Okay, so this is supposed to store, so it's going to return a response. All right. Now the first thing is we want to validate the request. So we take our request and then we validate. Now, what are we validating? The first thing we want to validate, and according to our, I'm going to close this, according to our function, we need the account ID, the account type ID, the currency ID, and all those ones. So these are the fields there. So we have the account type. Now this is required. And then it must exist in the account types. And the column is the UUID. Okay, so we are saying that the account type the user passes. So we have currency. And that should also exist in the currency table. So if you pass a UUID that does not exist in these two, it will throw an error. The next thing we want to validate is the name. Now this is required. And then, sorry, it has a maximum of 255 characters. Okay. And then we have the initial balance. So initial balance. And this is required, but then it's a numeric. So that's a number. And then we have the color code. Now this is nullable, but it has a length of maximum 255. Okay, so now we validated our request. As we said, we are following the initial flow. We validate the request, we create the record, and we return the response. Okay, so we validate our request and then we create our account. So this account service create. Now this requires a user, right? And then our request. That means that at this point we need to get the user who has currently logged in the application. All right, and to do that, we can go ahead as we saw in our auth. To get the user, we just I can just go ahead and do this. You get the user from here. So get user, and then there's our user, and then we go ahead and then we do our stuff. Okay, so to do the same thing here, we just say that user is equal to auth user. All right, and then we pass our user. So that's our user. At this point, we have our account. And then the next thing is we want to show the response to the user. Then we can just go ahead and copy one of these responses here. All right, so in our language, we are going to say that we've created the user, and then we are going to we've created the account, and we are going to return the account here. So that means we also need the account resource. So I'm going to open my integrated terminal, PHP artisan, make resource, account resource. All right, so I go ahead and change this to account resource, and I pass my account. All right, now let's work on our message. So we have, in our previous episode, we worked on data loading successful and all those things. Now we want to also work on when the data has been created. So data creating successful. We can make this data creator. Okay, and while creating the data, and then I'll say the so account created successfully. Okay, so I can go ahead and update this. Or I can just, let me just change this from active to passive. So I'm just going to fix the entire translations. Okay, so that we just have it straightforward like that. Okay, so here loaded successfully. while loading data. This one is created successfully whilst creating data. Okay, so then it follows suit. Okay, so we return this. So data create, and then at this point we need to pass our data, and our data is equal to account. All right, so not account type, account. So that means we need to also create account as we did here. So account, and then I want to work on the plural, so account. Okay, so now let me explain the code. So we validate our request, we get the account type, the currency, and then you realize here I'm just taking account type and I'm taking the UID currency, I'm taking the UID, the name, the initial balance, the color code. We get the user, we pass the user and the entire request to this function in our service class, which then gets the actual data from the database and then sets it. Okay, and then we return our response here, which has this. All right, now let's go ahead and test this. Now before we do that, we have to first migrate. So PHP Artisan migrate, and this should create our table, and then we can go ahead and test our API. So to create an account is going to be a post request, and then we have the body. So here we have the account type, we have the currency, we have the name, initial balance, and then the color code. So this is going to be a hex color code. Okay, all right, and then here we have our variables. So we're going to use the general account, and then we have our GH currency. We already have our variables, so I'm going to say that main. So that's my account. My initial balance is 0, and then I can leave the color code here. So I'm just going to say hex code. Okay. Now, before this should work, when we call this API right now, it wouldn't work, and that's because we've not created the routes for this. So we first head over to our routes table, our routes file, sorry, and then in the API here, just as we did for this, we can just go ahead and duplicate this code, take out the type, and then over here we look for our account controller. Okay, so we remove the type. Now this is to get, so we create the new one, which is the post, and it doesn't have this ID, and this goes to store. So store. Okay, so this, when you post to this API, it should store it for you. Now let's go ahead and test it. So when I call this, it gives me this error, find or fail. Oh, sorry, and let me make this correction. Now we are saying find or fail, and that means we need to pass the primary key as this as an argument. But because we are using the UID, we'll change this to first and change this to first. Now we can leave this as it is. It will work because the function, where the function is called, the validation has occurred here. So at this point, we are certain that the record exists. Okay, we are very sure that the record exists. So we can leave this at this point here and then expect it to work. Brilliant. So as you can see, it works perfectly. Now to be extra careful, you can also say that if the account type, if this is empty, that means we do not get anything. We can then abort 404 and then say that the data not found, and then our data here in this case is currency. Okay, so at this point we are just trying to make sure that if the time the validation happened, the data was there, and between that time and when this function was called, something happens, we still want to be sure that we have the right state. So this account type, sorry, and then this is currency. Okay, so we at this point we've made sure that even if the record does not exist, also we can also check if the record is active. So if the UID you passed was active, so I can improve this here, because you realize that in here we have this active. So if the user sends an account type that is no longer active, we also want to be sure. So here I can change this to that, where active is 1. Okay, and then I can do the same thing over here. Because because we are only returning, if you look at our APIs here, we are only returning the active ones, right, to the user. So we have to make sure that what they are sending to us is also active. Okay, so now we have made that check, which is very important. And then we create the record. I realize that we have everything, the ID and everything. So that means we have to update our resource. So I head over to my resource, account resource. And then over here, I need to change the ID will be this UUID, right? And then we have the currency and all those things. Now we have, as you can see, we have just the integers there. The primary keys, we want to show them the object to the front end. So I can go ahead. For now, let me work on these ones. So name, initial balance, the color code. And then if it's active. Okay. All right. I think that should be it. So let's create this account, another account again. And then we have this simplified one. Now we need to also show them the currency and the account type. So to do that here, I'm just going to have my currency and I'm going to call it currency. You realize this does not exist at the moment, as well as the account. I'm going to move this up, as well as the account type. Now this does not exist at the moment. So if you do this, we are going to get now. And then what we are going to do is we head over to our account here, and then we are going to create the relationship. So here, account type should return belongs to. So we are going to say that this, oh, sorry, this, okay, so return. So this belongs to, and then we have our account type as a class, and my foreign key is account type ID. All right, so I can duplicate this and say that's currency, and then change this to currency, so that's this class. Okay, so we are saying that this account belongs to an account type and then a currency. Now let's go ahead and do this. Now you realize we get the whole object, right? So we don't want that as well. And what we can do is we can use these old resources that we used here for these ones. So we can say that the account type is equal to new account type resource, and as well as currency, new currency resource. All right, now let's create another account. So now that's our account, that's our currency, and then there's the account details. So you see the color code is now okay. And that's it. Now let's get all the accounts. So now let's see the accounts that we've created. We should get 3 when we get, because we've created 3 of them. So let's get all the accounts. So when I do this, I'm supposed to get it, but I won't get anything. And that's because in my account controller, in my index, there's nothing here. So just as we did for the previous ones where we did the pagination and everything, I'm going to just go ahead and copy this, return this here. I'm not going to do much, change, inject my, so I get my request, and then I'm just going to copy this over and then change it. So I'm going to get my accounts, not my account type, so my accounts, and then I have my account resource. That's my account. So this is my account service. I'm just going to repeat this, and then I change the account types. Okay, and then I load my account. Also for the accounts, I don't think we will even want to paginate. We just want to load every account the user has, because we are going to show all of them at once in the system. So I'm just going to get my accounts. I don't need the pagination. I'm just going to return my accounts here. So I don't need the whole pagination. So we get the accounts up here and we return it. Right. Good. So now we need to create this. So we head over to our service class, and just as we did in the previous ones, but I'm going to do this again so that for those who are joining for the first time, you can understand. So here we have our object, which is this, and then we want to have the user as well. So this should return a collection. Okay. So in our controller, just as we did to get the user, we get the user and then we pass it here. So account, get the user, and then we pass it here. So that's the user. Okay. And then we get all. So I would want to also, when we say get all and we are passing a user, it's a bit not descriptive enough. So I'm going to say get all by user, because we are getting accounts specific to a user. Okay, so I get my user and then my object. Okay. So in our previous episode, when we did the get all, we did all the search and all those kind of things. I don't want to waste much time on that. I just want to copy that over and I'm going to explain. So here we are going to start off by building our query. So account is equal to account type, order by the name, and whether it's active or not. So here we're getting only the active accounts. Okay. So at this point, for the user's account, let's return everything. They can control which one is active or not on their end because it's their account. Now, if there's search, we want to search where the name is equal to that, right? So we have where the name is equal to just that. We can also search other properties, but for now, we just want to search only the name. And we can also search the account type and all those things, but we just want to search the name. So where the name, I can just take only that part. Okay, so where the name is also like that. And then we do not have pagination, so we just get the account. Okay, so accounts, let me fix this. All right, so get all by user. We are getting all the accounts by user. And we can also say, I mean, it's all by default. So let's get by user. Let me make it a bit easier. Get by user, and we have the user, the request. So if there's a search or anything, we pass it. And then we have the record here. So now let's use this in our account. So get by user, we get it, get by user, and then we return it. So over here, the get here, we do not need a per page because we want the user to get and only search. Okay. So as you can see, accounts loaded successfully, and then that's our accounts. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So as you can see, we have a lot of the accounts here. So general, the name of the account, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, we have 4, which is correct because we've created it 4 times. And we can look at the last one we created. So I'm going to copy this. And as you can see, this is the last one we created. All right, now let's make it a bit more clean. We pass the user. So right now we are loading all accounts, but we've passed the user. So we need to make sure that we are checking by the user. So where user ID is the user ID. Okay. So now we are loading only accounts belonging to the particular user that has logged in. Okay, so we have this here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right. So that's the last account. All right. So now for us to see what's happening in the database, okay, we want to also install MySQL Workbench. If you've not installed MySQL Workbench, you can go ahead and install it. You can find it on the MySQL websites. So I'm going to open my SQL Workbench, and then I'm going to connect to the database. So this is my local instance, and then I'm going to select star from Penger. So I'm going to use my All right, so as you can see, we have 5 accounts here. That's the user ID, and these are all the account types, and everything is here. Okay, so we've created all these accounts. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and then migrate down and back up again so that we have no accounts in the system. So I'm going to migrate back up. Now, if we get accounts, the user has no accounts, right? So let's create our first account. This is going to be my main account, and I have 100 in it. Okay, so as you can see, this is my initial balance, but it does not really say much about the initial balance. So let's make it a bit better. So I head over to my resource, and then in the initial balance, I say initial balance, which is this. And then I add another one, which is the initial balance test. And we can go ahead and do this. So just as we did in our previous episodes where we did create accessors, we are going to create an accessor. So public function, get initial balance test. And this is going to return a string. Okay, so now this is going to return. We already know our currency, and we already know the format in the currency. So we are going to use that to get the initial balance test, as we did when we were doing the currency sample, right? So we go ahead and say number format. This, this initial balance. Okay, so let's start building it. So I've created 2 accounts. I'm going to get all of them. And then as you can see, the initial balance test is now. So I'm going to fix, so get initial balance test attribute. Sorry. So as you can see, it's now 100 here. And then another thing we want to do is Laravel gives you cast. So you can cast the initial balance into a number if you want. But for now, we just we can look at how cast work. For example, we have cast here, and then I just copy it. You can type it yourself, but I just want to save time. So this is a double initial balance. And as you can see, cast it to a double. So if I create an account which has a balance of 59.89, you see it comes as a double, which is very nice. Good. All right, now back to what we're working on. So we have our initial balance. Now for the decimals, as you remember, we have our currency. So in the currency, which you've gotten up here, we can get the decimal places, and that's was created in our previous episode. So as you can see, we see 60, 59 here. So I'm going to get all accounts. I've created a new one. So you can see now we are getting our decimal places here. As you can see, we have our 2 decimal places. And even for the one that is 100, I'm going to show you. For the one that's 100, you see the double does not return the .00, but the test returns this. And then the next thing we want to work on is the decimal place, because that's the next thing in the number format. So the decimal separator. So this, I can go ahead and copy this currency. Decimal separator, separator. You can confirm this by looking at our currency. So 1000 decimal separator, you can just copy this. And then the last one is the 1000 separator. So I just go ahead to my currency, copy the 1000 separator, sorry. All right, so now I'm going to call this value. So this is our value, and we are returning our value. So as you can see, we have it, right? None of them is above. So let's create an account which is about 1000. So 1500. Okay. So as you can see, we have initial balance 1,5000.00. So we can get it and be sure. So that's it here. Perfect. Now the last thing is we want to show it as we have above here. Okay. So the next thing is we want to show the currency, whether it's left or right, and all those things. Now you realize in our currency model here. We worked on the sample, okay, which is does everything for us. We do not want to repeat this logic again. I just wanted to show you how it works. So what we are going to do is we are going to duplicate this, and then I'm going to say public function get sample. So I'm just going to say format, and then I pass this. It could be a string, it could be whatever. So the value, and then I pass the value here. So I just pass the value to this format, and then it should return this. So I can declare this as public static function, and then I won't get this, right? So that's the issue. That's why we do not want to do it as a static. So once we do it as static, that means you have to provide all this. So we're going to have this as a public function that, and then in here I already have this currency. So this currency here, and I just say this currency format, and then I pass the initial balance as my value. So I pass this initial balance as my value, and that should return me exactly the string formatted. So as you can see here, and that's because at this point we have our currency. It's not static, it has been initialized, and then we have access to this format function, which takes this value and then returns this. So now in our get sample here, we can go ahead and refactor this code and change this whole thing to say that return format. Oh, sorry, this format, and then pass 1000, and then take away this, right? So this would rely on that. So that means there's one place to render the format for a currency. And once we change this here, it affects everywhere. For example, when we get the currency by UID, it affects this sample as well. Okay, good. So that is that. Now we have all this. Now let's say we get everything. I want to get this particular currency. So I go ahead and then I add this as my, now I want to get this particular currency. So we need to create the get function. So I go to my accounts controller. So over here, this is my index to display, and then I can duplicate it. Let me minimize this. So this is going to be my get account. Okay, so this is get. With the get account, I only have the ID, which is my UID. And then I'm just I don't need to validate anything. So get by user. So now this get by user gets all the accounts, right? Now I'm going to improve this. So let's refactor this. Okay, change this from get accounts by user. So I'm going to change this here. Sorry, so that we have, okay, my index is here. Let me move this down. I like to put the index, the get, the store, the view here. So get account, so get accounts by user, which takes this. Then I'm going to duplicate this code and say that get account. So when I say get account, then I want the string UUID. So get account by user UUID. So I'm going to get the account by the user and the UUID. That's what I'm trying to tell anyone who reads the code. So account here, where the user is this. Okay, I can do this using the array approach. And then the UUID is equal to the UUID. Yeah, okay. And I don't know, at this point, I'm not altering anything. I'm just saying first. Okay. That's my account. If my account does not exist, just as we did here, simply say that account cannot be found. If the account is there, we return the account. And then here we return an account. Sorry. Good. All right. So in our controller, then we say get account by user UUID, and here we do not pass this, but we pass this ID because we know we have our UID. And then we change this from account to account, and then we have only one account, so it's a new, and then we pass our account. All right, so change this, I think that should be it. Get account API. Okay. Just add a bit. Okay. So let's get account, and then it says accounts loaded successfully. That means we need to change this message. So let's do it again. All right, so that's our results, and our results contains our account just one. So this is the ID, the account type, the currency. So this is the name of the account, the initial balance as a double if you want to do anything on the front end, and then the text so that the front end does not spend time trying to format it. It just shows what you are saying to the user. So the logic of trying to implement this whole symbol position and all that, you do not want to bed in the front end. That's one of the reasons why we have this. Now, one important thing that we want to also do is that we want to also return the current balance. So we have the initial balance, and when they do transactions, we want to return the current balance. Currently, we have not done any transaction or anything, so we expect the current balance to be equal to the initial balance. So for the current balance, we're also going to create an accessor to return it. And to do that, we are going to head over to the account and then duplicate it. So this is get initial balance test. So we are going to say get current balance, right? So this will return the current balance. And for now, we are saying the current balance is equal to the initial balance the user has. I can go ahead and improve this. Let me just fix this. Okay, so yeah. So the current balance, which is the value, is equal to the initial balance plus any transaction the user has done. So for now, we do not have any transactions done, right? So it's going to be plus the sum of the credit minus the debit transactions the user has done. And that's going to be our current balance. And then we return this. So I can go ahead and return this up here. Okay, and then I have, okay, I have that. So let's go ahead into our resource here, and then we change this to we duplicate this, sorry. So current balance. Okay, so this is going to be current balance. Now, because you realize we do not have a current balance field in our database, but we generate it using the accessor. So we go ahead and we do this. Now we have the current balance as null, and that means there's an error on the model. We can go ahead and look at it. Oh, current, not currency balance, sorry. It's a current balance. Now let's save this. Now you can see the current balance is the same as that. We can go ahead and say that this is not a string, it's just a float, and then we can then load it. Now, as you can see, we have the same thing as this. Now we want to get this initial balance test. We want to get the current balance test. So to do this, we can also go ahead in our resource, current balance test. In the future, we are going to move all of this into database fields, but for now we do not have it. We don't want to set it, so we're just going to keep generating it. So that's it. It's now just as we did in the field here. So we can just go ahead and copy this. This is no longer initial, so get current balance, and then current, not currency, current, sorry, current balance. Okay, so as you can see, we have the current balance. So let's see if the current balance was the initial, we've done transactions of, let's say, 100. When we get this, you realize the current balance, initial balance was 1,500. The current balance is 1,600 because of this 100 here. So that's why I'm just for now going to say that is 0. So that's it for the accounts endpoints. We can get accounts by the UID and create accounts. Now we have this account. Let's say I called all my accounts, including this one, me. I want to change this account from me into something else, and even change the account type. For the currency, once you create an account in a specific currency and you're trying to move it to a new currency, it's a bit hectic. You have to also try and move all the transactions from the previous currency to the new currency, or leave it in the previous currency and convert it into the new currency, right? Set it as the opening balance and then continue. So for changing the currency for now, we are going to not do that. We're going to do that in the subsequent episodes We just want to know how to change the name and some other relevant things upon it. All right, so I'm going to duplicate this and change this to update account. Okay, and this will then need the account ID. Now this is not going to be a post request, it's going to be a patch request because you're updating some parts of the account. All right, so I'm going to close all of this and leave this open. All right, so we have the same thing. So we head over to our routes. Over here we create a patch route, and then this takes the ID, sorry, and update. So we have this update. Now when we call this, nothing happened because we do not have the update method. Okay, so now we are going to go ahead and create it. We are going to do is we are going to just duplicate this. Okay, so we have store. We are going to duplicate the store and then call this update. Okay, so update resource in storage. We can just say update. Okay, so this is create account endpoint. I just want to add yeah. Now this will have the ID. So at this point we have an account. Okay, and we need to validate all this. So make sure that the currency, but we said we are not going to update the currency, so we do not even need it in the request, right? So I'm just going to remove the currency from the request. For now, we do not need it. And then we need the initial balance and the color code. And so here, this is the user and all those things. Now we want to make sure even the request, we validated all these fields. Now we want to make sure that the user, own the account. So we are going to first, the user is here. And what we are going to do is we are going to get by user and account. So I get the account. So at this point, if the account does not exist, remember, if you don't own it, it will throw this error. So if you send an account ID for another user, it will tell you that the account does not exist because it's not yours. The account is there, but it's not yours. Now, once we have this, the next thing is you want to update the account, right? So let's work on the logic. I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate this, change this to update. Now for the arguments here, we are no longer going to need the user because the user is there. We are not going to change who owns the account. We are just going to change the account itself. So account, and that's what we want the user to pass. Okay, like I said, we are not touching the currency, so I'm going to leave this. Now let's go ahead and update our account. At this point we have an account, which is this. I'm going to remove this, and then let's go ahead. We are not going to change the user on the account, but we can change the account type. So the user can change from a savings to whatever account it is, and then they can change the name. So the request name, they can change the initial balance, and they can change the color code, right? Okay, so once this is done, then another thing we want to do is we want to set updated that to carbon now. So once you say that this is the time it was updated, and then we update the record. You can also call save, and then you return the account. Okay, all right. So when we updating, we first get our account type ID in case the user is switching that one. If they are not switching, it's going to be the same anyways. The name, the initial balance, the color code, and this, and then we return this. So that's what we are going to use to update it. So over here we say that update, and now this is wrong because we are passing the account, not the user. Okay, and then here we say that update. So that means you need to create the update message. So we've created load, create, but not update. So data update success, data update error. So an updated successfully, an error occurred whilst updating data. Okay, so now let's put this to test. For my account here, as you can see, it was called me, right? So I'm going to change this to another thing. So I'm going to call this savings account. Okay, now let's update it. It says that the account type field is required 2 more, and that's because we are using patch, and this is something that you would find you would experience when you're using Postman. When you're doing patch, you cannot do form data. You can do xwww form URL included, or you can do a raw JSON. So I'm going to move this, head over to that, and then add my description. So X code, okay, and then send a request. As you can see, when I move from form data to this, it works, and that's because we are using patch, right? So please, when you experience this, you should know that that's the problem, because with form data you can pass files and all those things, but with xww form URL included, it does not. You can also do raw with JSON if you want. So as you can see, our account has changed to savings account, and then I've updated the initial balance to 0. So this, look, if you notice before we update this, it's main 1500. If I call it again, it's now savings account 0. So I can update my current balance again to 2200, and then instead of calling it savings account, I'm going to call it savings, and then I'm going to look for the savings account type. So savings, so this is the ID for the savings account, and so I'm going to say savings. Okay, so I'm going to set this good, and I'm going to add this new variable. I'm using variables so that it's easy to reuse them. Now when I save this again, now my account type is now savings account. If I come back here, it was general account before. If I refresh this, it's now savings account. So that's how to update this data. Okay, you realize that we are not updating the active to whether it's true or false. So we can also update that. So active 1, so this is going to be a boolean. It can be 1 or 0, or true or false. So I'm just going to send 1 or 0, true or false, which is the same thing. So I can just do that. So when you're creating an account, by default it's true, but when they want to update it, then they can then disable or enable it. So that means we're in our system here. We can say active. Now it's nullable, but it's a boolean. Okay, and then in the update, we can then call the active. So as you can see, this account is active. When I set it to 0, it's no longer active. Okay, when I set it to 1, it's active, and the color code is now, and I have my balance and everything. So let's get a color code. So let's say this red, copy my hex code for red, and then I update my account. Okay, so that's the color code. So we are going to send this color code to the front end. All right, so that's this. I'm going to duplicate this, move it down here, and then say delete accounts by UUID. Okay, so the same thing for this. I'm going to add the test by UUID. All right, so delete accounts, we switch this to a delete, and this does not need a body, it does not need anything. Okay, so now we head over to our Visual Studio Code. We scroll down to we open our API, and then we add another route. So this is a delete route, sorry, and then this will call the delete function. Okay, all right, so now let's head over to this, and then we have a create, we have the get. So I'm just going to take the get and then call this delete, change this to, sorry, delete. Okay, so with this we have that we get the account, and then once we get the account, we want to delete the account and then return the message. Now for this, we won't return any object. We're just going to say that data delete success. Okay, so I'm going to create it for that and then change this. So data delete, okay, and deleted or deleting. Okay, while deleting, okay. All right, so now once that is done, we know that this is it. So here we want to get the results of the delete action. So we get to make sure your account is yours, and then we delete. And then here we want to pass the account. And then once we delete it, we want to return the message. So over here, we can return two different status codes. So if it's successful or it's not, we have to return the appropriate code. Okay, so if the result is false, that means it could not delete, then we want to return an error. So you can just abort. So abort 500, and then we can return this message. So error. So this should return a 500 message saying that the data an error occurred deleting that. Okay, so here we would simulate that. So we need to create this. So I head over to our account. I'm just going to copy this, and this is delete. It takes an account, not the request, and then returns a boolean. And because we are doing soft delete, whenever we delete a record, it's going to be in the database, but it's going to have the deleted at set. So I'm going to say that this account delete. Okay, and then I'm going to return true. All right, so that's our delete, and that's it here. So now let's go ahead and test it. So I have this account ID, and I'm going to delete it. Okay, so now I get the message 200. Okay, account deleted successfully. Now this is the account ID. If I go to get my account, it tells me account not found. You get all the stack traces because we are in debug mode. If we switch to production mode, we only get the error message, and I can demonstrate that by changing this. So we go to our environment, we change this to false, and then we come back and we call this again. As you can see, we get only the error message. If we change this to true, we get the entire stack trace. Okay. All right, so now let's restore this, and I'm going to head over to my workbench. I'm going to call this again, and as you can see, this one has the deleted that. So I'm going to take this and set it to null. So this is my, okay, so just going to go ahead and update Penger and then set deleted that to be equal to now, where the account ID is this. Okay. All right, so now we've done it. So if I get again, I get my account back, right? Now let's test the situation where there's an error whilst deleting. So let's say we return false here. Okay, and then we delete again. Now you see we get this, an error occurred whilst deleting account, and we get the error 500. So that's an internal error because something happened internally whilst deleting it. So for now, we just remove this, and then I'm going to get this account and delete these ones that we had. So I'm just going to change this. Good. So now if I get my account, I shouldn't see this anymore. It's gone. Now I have another one. So I'm going to keep deleting until I have at least, how many accounts do I have now? I have 1, 2, 3, 4. So let me keep deleting until I have the one that I want. Okay, so I'm going to keep deleting. Okay, so, and I have 1, 2, 3, just 3 accounts. I want to delete everything until I have just one. Okay, so I'm just testing the API. Okay, so account deleted, get accounts, and I have just 1 and 2. Okay, so I'm deleting all the general accounts that I created. Okay, so now if I call again, you realize the account is not found, right? So if I get my account, I have only the savings one that I created, this one. All right, so that's it for the accounts API. We have created 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 endpoints. One to get all the accounts, another to get accounts by UID, to create an account, to update an account, and to delete an account. So that's the API endpoints. From our previous episode and from this episode, we've tackled the currencies, accounts, and account types. In our next episode, we are going to integrate these APIs we've created into this UI. We are going to go back to our Flutter and create accounts to complete the entire onboarding process. And then we can go ahead and tackle the main issue of tracking our expense. So that's it for today's episode. If you have not subscribed, please do so. I'm going to go ahead and push the changes to GitHub and then drop the links in the description below. So we head over to our GitHub. In our previous episode, we talked about using issues. So I'm going to create this episode 13, and I'm going to talk about accounts API. So we are going to talk about the things create endpoint to one list account, create account, update account, get account, create account, update account, and then delete account. And I'm going to assign this to myself. Yeah, endpoint. Okay, so that's it. Now we get our issue ID 4. So I head over to my integrated terminal here. Git add all, git commit. For now, let's first check out to that branch. We just git commit, sorry. Check out branch feature est, and ID is 4, so 4, and then we talk about account API endpoint. Okay, so that's my branch. So now git commit. My commit message is feature number 4, account API endpoint. Okay, so now I'm going to git push, and I need to set the upstream. Okay, so now that's my link for creating the PR. All right, and yeah, so I assign it to myself, create, and then I'm going to rebase and merge. All right, so if we now go to our issue, we're going to leave it once we complete it in the previous episode, then we mark it as closed. Sorry, in the next episode after integrating it in the Flutter, then we mark it as closed. So now we have our changes. All right, see you.